Hello, today. Right, I'm going to read this paragraph to you and you'll soon recognise that it's not of today. But here we go anyway. The current excessive debt structure has obtained its present astronomical proportions due to an unbalanced distribution of wealth during our years of prosperity. Too much of the product of labour was diverted into unproductive investments, and as a result what seemed to be our prosperity was maintained on a basis of abnormal credit both at home and abroad. When the crisis finally hit, debtors were forced to curtail their consumption in order to reduce their debts. This naturally has led to falling prices and increased unemployment. And unemployment further decreases the consumption of goods, which further increases unemployment. And thus the vicious cycle of deflation has continued to the point where we now find almost 1/5 of our entire working population unemployed in many countries with prices of everything greatly reduced, our national income below the level achieved before the crisis, and our debt burden greater than before. So that is well pertinent to some countries. Greece would be the obvious one. But let's move on to the last paragraph of this. It was actually a speech to, or do you make speeches to Congress? Testimony to Congress. The programme, which I have proposed, is largely of an emergency nature, designed to bring rapid economic recovery. We need urgently to address this debt and unemployment problem, or we are going to get a collapse of our whole credit structure, which means a collapse of our capitalist system, and we will then have to start all over again. We simply have got to take care of the unemployed, or we will have revolution in this country. That was actually Mariner Eccles, who was FDR's man at the Fed. He was governor of the Fed at the time. And that was, as I say, a testimony to Congress, the end of it. It's just to say these things do happen over and over again. It was a credit boom and it's a credit bust, and there are ramifications for that, and it has to be handled in a certain way, or there are certain ways of handling it. Right, let's move on and go back to our labour force participation rate for women this time in the United States. We saw the men one and it was going all the way down, top left, bottom right. Remember that one? It was just since the Second World War it was up, and then since it's just come down and down and down, or should I say down and down and down. And this is the shape of the women. Obviously low just after the Second World War, 33%, a third of the women in the workforce, and then it went through half women in the workforce in the late 70s. And it came up to 60%, never made 2/3, and it's tailed off again slightly since the dot-com crash. This next chart is the two of them together. Now, to get the both in the same chart, the men in red there don't look like they're coming down as steeply as they did. Remember, it looked a lot steeper in that chart I gave you. But to widen up the chart to get the women in, their initial 30%, it doesn't look as though the men are coming down, but you can see the numbers are obviously the same, up towards 90%, about 87%, and down all the way to 70% now. And the women going from their 33% up to 60% and tickling down since the Great Recession, well, since the dot-com crash, and accelerating through the Great Recession. And just to show that, it can be seen in this chart. It's not looking wild and obvious, but you can see now we've got 1998 on the left. So that first bar is the dot-com crash, and the wider grey bar is the Great Recession. And we're coming in at 75 for men in 1998, came down through the dot-com crash, maintained working through the housing boom, but since the Great Recession has now got down to 70. So men 75 down to 70 from 1998, and the women have come down from 60, and their drop down is mainly after the Great Recession, and they're down to 57.5. They're not huge sounding numbers, 75 down to 70 and 60 down to 57.5, but that actually adds up to an awful lot of people. Okay, and just to push home this US unemployment thing, I'll go back to this one, which is a civilian unemployment, and then we've got the percentage of population ratio, called the M ratio, and we can see how it really from 1960 went up and up till to nearly 2/3, but since the dot-com crash has come down to a rate of 58.5, which was actually achieved in the late 70s. There is an awful lot of unemployment there, and in most Western countries there's a lot of unemployment, and there's a really big question of how people are to be put back to work, because at the moment the way money is spread out is generally via wages, and there are a lot of people that aren't receiving wages. Right, let's move on and say that in the capitalist way they're not liable to receive wages, because this is Asian aggregate export growth by destination. This is just to say that Asia is catching a cold because the West is not buying their goods. These are percentage year-on-year increases or decreases in the export growth or export non-growth. You can see the Great Recession, where at its peak downwards it was down to minus 30%, but that wasn't much to beat, and there was soon plus 50% year-on-year in 2009. Everything was starting to get going again after the Great Recession, but you can see the shape of it. Exports from Asia to the United States, the EU, which is the lowest there, Japan, Asia with not Japan, and the rest of the world, all of them showing exactly the same shape. From the coming out of the boom, come on, let's go guys, everything's fine, it's been downhill ever since, and that's a long 2.5 years of going down and downhill, less and less exports going out from Asia. And that's very important, because the world needs Asia and Asia needs the world. Right, we'll just finish with this, which is kind of going back to the United States, and this is the USDX, the dollar index 1 year chart, stretching back 1 year. So the dollar came in at, it's a number balanced against a basket of other currencies, mainly the euro. 76 it started a year ago at, and it's wobbled about, but generally for 10 months it was going up, really from 76 all the way up to 84 at one time. Now this was going to damage US exports with the dollar strong up at 84. So in the summertime the vibrations were going out that the Fed would be doing some sort of QE or something that was going to reduce the US dollar value. And as summer's gone on, and obviously with an acceleration lately, the QE was definitely coming, and now we have the US dollar index down to well under 80, near 79 point nothing much. This is the great race to the bottom, to try and debase your currency enough so you can have the exports, so you can pull money in from the external world. But everybody is trying to do it. And obviously when everyone's trying to debase their currency, it's classic race to the bottom, and nobody's going to win. Certainly not people holding currencies, because everyone's just at debasing them. That's it. Bye.